So you're all very welcome. Thanks a million for joining us. My name is Gavan Casey. This is the 42.e Rugby Show live. We might as well get our guests out. The first one, I mean, God bless him, he was locked there in the basement of Eden Park in Auckland for the last 6 months, but they finally let him out of captivity, and we're delighted to have him back. It is the 42.e's very own Murray Kinsella. On Muzza. How are you, Muzza?
I'm good, thank you very much. Lovely introduction again. Didn't slag me off this week.
No, yeah, last week I was saying he's a digital influencer. I don't think it went down very well. Also may have accused him of being a blogger, but what can you do? Our main guest this evening, I'm always saying the main guest after you, and in all part, and I'm sorry, you're on an equal footing apart from the fact that this man, of course, had a stellar rugby career and is now the head coach of the Dragons. He is the father of Dragons. Please welcome. Oh, I can't believe it. Bernard Carlo Bourne of the House Jackman. Bernard Jackman, everybody. How are you, Bernard?
Good, thank you.
I don't know if you're watching Against the Head there during the week, lads, but apparently nobody gives a fiddlers about GAA or soccer anymore. Rugby is now the people's game, Bernard. That's
wasn't my comment. Get on to RT Player and check now. Yeah, I think this caused obviously a little bit of controversy. Certainly, I think it's great that rugby's grown and growing, but to say we're the people's game is it's pushing a little bit. But I think that the idea was how exciting it's going to be if we can win this week and going to Twickenham, searching for a Grand Slam, and how the international game we're able to compete at provincial level, we're able to compete, and but there's obviously some fabulous sports in this country that are more popular than we are, and I love those sports as well. So I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, it's a nice diplomatic answer there.
Listen, rugby's far from being people's game. I think I agree with you there, but it definitely has grown in areas of the country that probably wasn't as popular before. Like, even take the under-20s team on Friday, there's a guy from Donegal, guy from Letterkenny on the team. So things like that have developed a bit more. You're seeing more of those kind of youths guys coming through into the squad. And like, it probably is still a bit of an elitist sport, but I think there are a few who have worked quite hard to get, as you mentioned, RT, to get those kind of coaches into schools that never really played before. So I think they're making progress there. There's a long way to go, certainly, but it does definitely capture the imagination. You look at the TV viewing figures, and some of the top 10 in the last couple of years have been rugby matches. So yeah, we're making good progress, but definitely a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously been decentralised in recent years. You were really coming from Carlo to become a successful rugby player, but like, your point I think, in fairness, your own point at the time was just that the youth development officers and things like that in the country had done a stellar job in bring it around to all of the counties in Ireland now. You mentioned a young fella from Donegal. The lads maybe got a little bit excited, but you're okay with it not being necessarily the people's game, but just a sport that continues to grow and blossom.
I think we want participation, people to support it, people to be knowledgeable about it. You know, it is a great game. I've been lucky enough to make a career out of it for 20 years, and if I wasn't doing it professionally, I'd be doing it for free. You know, I'd be coaching in a club in Tullow on a Tuesday night, or you know, fundraising or whatever. So it's a great game. It's great that it's not better than any other game. It's just a game that I've been lucky enough to play more of, and I think it's great that everybody's I think with kids, you want them to have access to as many different games as they can, and let them choose. Whereas probably before, you know, kids from rural areas didn't have an access point, whether that was a school or whether that was a club, to actually try it, and that's what's been a big improvement. And if they like it, great, they can play it. And I would certainly never try and separate kids from and stop kids from playing another sport. You know, I think it's up to them to make a choice, and if they become, you know, Irish fans or Leinster fans or Connacht fans, and you know, in years to come, well then great. But it's about a love of sport rather than a particular sport for me.
And there is that crossover as well. Like, so many guys speak to Luke Fitzgerald, he talks about the benefit of his GA background, high ball skills, Rob Carney, and that works the other way as well. Like, absolutely, you know, guys going into GA who maybe have a bit of contact skills from rugby, obviously you can't tackle the same way, but that crossover definitely works. There's definitely the kind of spatial awareness, hand-eye coordination, that kind of stuff.
And there's also a lot of crossover in terms of coaching. So a lot of the GA coach, Damien Duff, spent a couple of days in Leinster. So everyone's looking to try and gain ideas from other sports and then incorporate that into how they coach, and how they manage players and how they set up their week.
Yeah, I can sense a new controversy brewing after Murray describing it as "ga" there, but we'll. I mean, you mentioned that you'd be still involved down in Tullow. You were, of course, involved there at a certain point in your coaching career. You were in Coolmine as well, Newbridge, and then within a few years you were coaching at the very top level of the game. And we could spend all night going through France and things like that, but I think it's maybe time to rip the plaster off. It was a difficult weekend for you down in South Africa. There was a lot said by both yourself in terms of your players' performance, and also our friends at Wales Online had a pop at Bernard. I think it was Andy Howell compared you to what Steve Hansen had said of the Welsh players back in 2002, something like that, where he was, I suppose, suggesting that they weren't up to scratch, and then all of a sudden they started playing as though they weren't up to scratch. Is that a fear that you might have when you criticise your players?
Yeah, you don't want to be criticising your players, but you also got to be realistic of where we need to get to. I think if you look at the Dragons over the last 5 or 6 years, we've accepted probably underperformance too much, and that was certainly the mantra and the mandate I was given going in there, not just from the board, it was very much from the core playing group, who effectively, so the Dragons have struggled to keep their best players because it wasn't seen as being an ambitious place, and if we want to change that, if we want to become successful, we got to start demanding more of ourselves and not tolerating consistent underperformance. If everybody has a blip, and I think we, as coaches, you don't want that to happen, but you'd be more tolerant of a blip if you can see really good practice every day and consistent performances. But when you don't have those, and when you see a team not playing to the level they're capable of, I'm not saying we should have beaten the Kings, but we're certainly better than we looked. So you got to confront that and say, listen, that's not good enough, because it's not just, we have a lot of youngsters playing at the moment, and it's important for them not to be happy to be playing regional rugby or playing pro rugby. That's only a starting point, and unfortunately sometimes that happens, that you get caught in a bubble of, I'm in South Africa, or I'm in the RDS and I'm playing professional rugby. That's a given. You got to be competing. You got to be competitive. You got to be getting better. You got to be winning. So probably it's probably a big culture shock for the group. But the key thing is that we re-signed 12 of our, we call our core DNA group. So guys who come from Gwent, who came through the Dragons Academy, they've all re-signed for 3 years because they want that type of leadership and direction and demand for success. The people we've recruited, like Roger Williams, Ryan Bevington, Ross Moriarty, Richard Hibbard, they want that too. So it's not like, 1 week I'm saying, no, it's going to be nice and soft and everything is great. Everything will be great once we get the performances right and the consistency right. So the people that we want to build a team around are very much signed up for that. The people that are coming in understand that it's a project where you got to come in and roll up your sleeve. It's going to be really hard because we don't have a monopoly on talent. We're no more talented than everyone else. We have a small budget, so we really need to drive standards internally, and also we got to show those youngsters that the level is there, and that's what we're going to demand, because I believe you get what you accept. So if you accept sloppiness and underperformance, more than likely you're going to get that, unless you've got a really strong leadership group who are able to switch it on a Saturday, or a really talented group. So it's difficult. Wales Online are free to have a pop. When you get hammered by the Kings away from home, you deserve criticism. And it was interesting. I was reading an article about Eddie Jones yesterday, and he said, everyone wants to talk to him, but generally there's 3 types of messages he's been told. You're doing a hell of a job, you're doing a shit job, or if you do this, you'll be doing a good job. You know what I mean? So people have got loads of opinions, loads of advice, which is great. Our job is to try and follow a plan, try and problem solve as you go. So I think the Kings will be a good in the future. We look back on the Kings as a day that we probably learned a lesson and hopefully was a turning point for us.
You mentioned some of the new recruits, and I know you said after the defeat to the Kings that speaking to some of them, like, you had to really convince them to come over to...
We had a very bad reputation, so when you get Ross Moriarty, who's 23 years of age, British and Irish line, at the peak of his powers, it's a massive gamble for him to come to the Dragons. But so, and I promised them I'd change it. So I got to stick
So
to
you promised the new recruits or the club?
everybody. I promised particularly, yeah, well, I'm talking about, say, the recruits. You know, I had to convince them that this was going to be different, that the Dragons that they're going to come into in June is going to be a different organisation. Part of that is, I suppose, rebuilding the squad a little bit. Part of that is bringing through some youngsters and giving them game time so that next year they're not learning on the job, they've experienced it. So, you know, we played against Ulster. Traditionally this season we've sent a lot of youngsters away from home to try and get them experience game time. You know, we've a young winger who's very talented, George Gasson. His first ever Pro 14 game was he was marking Charles Piatel, the most expensive player in the world. So he sees and feels what he's going to be facing if he's going to be a pro rugby player. You know, Dan Babos is a young 9. You know, we had to get a letter from his mum to get on the flight to go to South Africa. He's only 17, you know, but he's a hell of a player. But unfortunately, ideally, in an ideal scenario, he doesn't play till he's 21, 22. But the group we have, that's what we have, and let's manage them, and let's bring them on, let's develop them as quick as we can, and let's, in June, have a group who understand that sloppy standards won't be accepted, bring in people who know what it's like, what it takes to win, and suddenly then you start to change a group and you start to change your reputation.
Yeah, you married the two, I guess.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, because obviously when you're looking at, now I don't read Welsh news often, and I very rarely read Wales Online, but when you're in the news because you're supposedly under pressure, like presumably for you, you've come into a club that finished 11th out of 12 teams last year, and you already clearly have an eye on next year. Yeah. This is well, at least a medium term, if not a long term project. And is it too much to expect to have turned their fortunes completely in the first 6-8 months?
No, I think we would have obviously. You always hope that you can turn it around, you know, just by clicking your fingers, or whatever. But very rarely in sport that happens. So we you know, we had a look at the group early doors. We could see it needed reinforcement, and then we made the decision. Well, then we obviously had to go and get the people on board. So we've announced 10 already. There's a couple more to be announced over the next 3 or 4 weeks, which will give us a nice injection of talent experience. And then we said, well, listen, if there's no relegation in the Pro 14, okay, it's not that we're throwing gimmies. We want to be competitive every game. But if there's ever a year to actually blood youngsters, it's this year. Because with our budget next year, we probably we can't afford to have the same depth of experience. You know, we can get our first choice, second choice, probably guys who've been there, done that. But then our third and fourth choice are probably going to have to come from our academy, which is great because you want that local talent coming through. So we've given a lot of those. So we've given 10 teenagers debut in the Pro 14. You know, only one other team has given. I think 3 is the max anyone else has given. So, you know, if you're given 300% the amount of debuts to teenagers, there is going to be a little bit of learning for them, but that will come back to us. You know, if those kids were risks of leaving in June, it'd be different. They've all signed for 2-3 years, so we'll benefit from that. So you need to be patient, and every coach is looking for patience and 2 or 3 year plans and etc. But I think if you look at how we're going about it, there's an obvious reason why there's little bits of blips and not closing out games, but there's a plan behind it, and we just got to follow the plan.
There you go, Andy Howe. Leave the man alone, will you? For God's sake.
Andy's
bit of patience, Andy.
He's a good bloke.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it was to move on to obviously Ireland, Scotland. Like it was Warren Gatland who gave you a glowing recommendation for the job you're in now, and of course it was an Ireland-Scotland game, which really spelled the end for Gatland as Ireland's head coach in 2001. But looking at Ireland and Scotland's, it's not even a rivalry really, or at least there hasn't been the kind of boil that we might associate with the Ireland-Wales games in recent years. But I don't know, some of you in the audience might be too young to remember. No, I actually think we should be fine. But in the 90s, we didn't beat Scotland in the Six Nations or 5 Nations in the 90s. And then in the following decade, it's a complete turnaround in fortune. The only thing is they've scuppered our attempts to win a Grand Slam or a championship, I think, twice in the last, 20 years. And maybe the reverse isn't quite true. But in recent years, Murray, I suppose we've always expected in recent years we're going to turn them over. We have to, because we've been a better team, and there's a little bit of trepidation about this one, I guess.
Yeah, you say there's no venom there, but I think there is definitely resentment on the Scottish side. I think you probably saw that in Murrayfield last year. They probably feel that their group of players is as talented as Ireland's, that they possibly should have been in contention for those championships that Ireland won, and that they've underperformed. So they probably look, I think you've seen in the Glasgow-Munster rivalry that's really developed there, they probably look at Munster and go, we're a better club than these guys. I think that's come into international level. At the start of the championship, you probably look at that fixture and go, Scotland at home, there's definitely 4 points, possibly even 5 if you get a good performance. But certainly coming into this fixture now, I think that's been flipped on its head a little bit. I think there is trepidation there. I think Ireland are justifiably still the favourites. But we've seen from Scotland that they're so lethal, so dangerous. We're going to go through some of their attack in a while, but they're definitely coming with threats that marry up well to where Ireland have shown vulnerabilities as well. And I think it's a really interesting coaching battle as well. Two really smart rugby coaches who have an ability to kind of tailor the game plan to what the opposition is doing. You saw with Scotland against the English, attack that breakdown, those kind of two-man pods in midfield and get those massive turnovers. Joe Schmidt, he's famous for picking out the opposition flaws. So really interesting to see how they approach this game, especially considering that Gregor Townsend has actually kind of learned a bit from Joe over the years. When he started in Glasgow in 2012, he had a long conversation with him, I think, about his coaching style, about what he could learn from Leinster at that time. So I think Joe might regret that phone call a little bit now. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating battle. I think there is definitely a nice edge to it, but the big challenge for Scotland is whether they can hit that emotional peak that they hit against England again this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's so often a problem not only in rugby but in elite level sport. If you I suppose dip into the well, so to speak, it's difficult to do it kind of week on week, and yet with the break you might think that they might be sufficiently recuperated to produce that sort of a kind of a maniacal aggression again. Like, say for example, Ireland in the World Cup, you have this emotional game against France, and the Argentina game almost came too soon afterwards to really reproduce that, albeit you're missing 5 key players as well. Another thing that I find it interesting about it is that, like, whatever about rugby and being the people's sport or whatever, it's one of the few sports remaining, I think, where the top class participants still kind of talk a little bit about revenge, and we're going back to last year and how Scotland completely, pulled the carpet from under Ireland in a way. And I think it was Jack McGrath was saying over in Carton House, like, yeah, we've got an eye on this not only because of this year's championship, but because we kind of owe them one for last year. Like, is that part of the conversation, Bernard, behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think every week you're looking to try and make sure that the mindset is right. So if it's a poor performance, I know Joe came out and spoke publicly about our defence. That's not for the media or the public. That's actually to send a message to his players. Don't get carried away. There's a lot of good elements to our win against Wales, but if we defend like that, we're going to get ripped apart. If you've had a near perfect game, you'll talk about something that happened a year ago. You know what I mean? And that's why the Munster Glasgow games have become quite tetchy, because there's baggage carried into them from previous encounters. So, but I think the difference with Scotland now and the challenge we have is that I think they've shown quite good mental resilience. So they obviously their away form has been really poor. Bar, I think Gregor's first tour they went to Australia and got a win down there. But they flopped in Wales, okay, with massive expectation, massive confidence, because they had a really good November. And then they got into a real battle against France, conceded some really soft tries, particularly from Teddy Thomas. It was a game that could have got away from them, but they just ground their way back into the game, and probably went away from a Gregor type game because they kicked penalties and started the build phase and take less risk, but got the win. And then against England, they were able to merge not just that manic aggression because you're playing against England, but they actually they played the core Gregor Townsend game plan, and now they're going to come to Dublin and they'll see this as a way of replicating. Now, because they beat England as well, they got the reward. Sometimes if you put in a heroic performance and you lose, there's a chance then that you won't be able to repeat that. But when you put in a big performance, lots of physicality, lots of accuracy, lots of energy, and you get a win, it just gives you massive momentum now. So they'll just see this Ireland game as the next step for them to show that they're resilient enough to go away from home and play their game. So I think they'll definitely come here I think Gregor took a lot of self-analysis in terms of his prep for Wales, and I think they learned from that. And now this is the first chance they've had since then to get into an away game mode and see if the change he's obviously going to make to his prep can actually get a better performance.
All right, yeah. I think, Bernard, you're going to kick us off in terms of analysis, looking at some of those tries that they scored against England.
Yeah, just this came from so they obviously want to take. So if you're going to kick the ball off, you got to get in the cheap seats because they'll just go quick. And the big thing for Gregor Townsend is a high ball and play time. So I don't know if you noticed, but after the Wales game, Warren Gatland spoke about how the fact I think the ball was only played for something like 37 minutes, but yet the previous 5 games against Ireland it was 42 minutes. But if you were at the game, it felt like a game with really high ball and play time, but it wasn't. Ireland were just Ireland were just controlling it, controlling it way better, and making sure that the game was very rarely got away from that structure type of game. When it did get away from that, we can see the tries. So this line out, England they actually had it wasn't a quick throw. They actually formed the line out, but the ball went out and back into play within 6 seconds. So like that's very rare. Usually when they go quick, but then if they can't go quick, it's actually probably 20 seconds. But they got this set up and they got them all going incredibly quickly, and then they just play off it, and it goes a little bit pear-shaped. The referee gets in the way, but it's just this willingness. Like there's not really space in the backfield here. That's covered, but their willingness to actually put the ball on the toe. They get lucky. Obviously, Hugh Jones gets it, but that kind of unorthodox type of mindset is actually a nightmare for defence coaches, and it means that you've got to be extra aware, and they just need a little bit of a fumble or a little bit of a break to exploit that.
That tempo you mentioned, though, you can hear them on the ref, like tempo. Yeah, like every line it takes 20, 25 seconds. The quick taps, always get ball back in play. And as you say, that is a weakness for Ireland. Like that try, we're going to look at it later on, the Aaron Shingler try. Ball's in play for 3 minutes, and that's when you get those poor decisions 100%. On the outside edge. So Scotland will look to build those long passages, kick in field, and keep Ireland on their feet for long passages. Yeah,
and that's what we got to... So I think you're going to talk about our defence, but our defence from static situations is actually quite comfortable. From scrum line out, we haven't looked under any danger. It's when it becomes a little bit turnovers, loose play, we do get caught a little bit narrow. Here, look at the score here. This is, it's 10-6, 30th minute. They get a brilliant turnover from a penalty in their own 22. Most teams are there. England have had a little bit of pressure. The mindset is, let's get the ball, at the halfway line. Let's start with a line out. They're gone. And it's just that, like even the pack aren't ready. They go, England regain initiative a little bit here. The ball is sloppy. Maitland's going backwards. He throws a loose offload. Doesn't matter. They try and get away from the touchline. England flood the ruck because Scotland look disorganised, and because they flood the ruck and get a little bit narrow. Okay, so if you look at Ireland, that's a picture we've seen a little bit with Ireland where the second last defender is there and he's leaving this guy out to dry a little bit. Sorry for my graphics. Use a different system in the Dragons.
Sorry, bro.
Pen and paper. But what Scotland have is really good width. Okay, so they've got bodies wide, and then it's just a brilliant pass from Finn Russell.
It's an outrageous pass.
So most teams and most tens, if they see that threat there, okay, if they see that threat there,
you just drag.
They don't throw that pass. They took it, and that's why Eddie Jones has given his players a license to come up and shut down the danger. But Finn Russell, and he's error prone, but in fairness to him, he had a poor game against Wales. He had a poor game against France, and I actually really admire the fact that in a crucial Test match, Calcutta Cup, they're under pressure, they're leading the scoreboard. He has the Leroy to throw that pass, and then after that, it's just a brilliant try. So you see Hugh Jones, great pace. They get into the opposition 22, quick ball. Ryan Wilson plays 9. And this is brilliant by John Barkley. I mean, so many forwards would just crash that up, try and be a hero. Look at he changes his angle, he goes back out again, gets a soft shoulder, offloads to Laidlaw. McInally, is a decent player, gets a great carry. And again, just having wit both sides of the field, it's a brilliant try. England's defence is, over the last 2 or 3 years has been incredibly solid, and they're made look like schoolboys. And then last one is just a line out strike, but again they've gone quickly, and it's just that blind pass from Laidlaw to Hugh Jones, and what a finish. He's been exceptional. He scored 10 tries in 14 tests, and this is just going back to their mindset again. It's the last clip I'm going to show. So they're beating Australia 29-17. you know, most teams would be happy to take 3 points here, kick to the corner, they get a penalty, and they're just ruthless. And just their mindset is, you know, is it on to go and play? And then they do. And it's just the ability for Hugh Jones to actually beat people when the defence isn't set properly. So they look to go to the corner. They obviously get a call in that the straight-ins are narrow, and they're gone. You know, and even international level, you say to your under 10s, don't turn your back. You know, but a lot of teams don't exploit those opportunities, and that's all they're looking for.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity? And let's trust yourself. And Gregor he started with Glasgow, and we saw it leading to a Pro 12 title. They run a massive amount of meters every week of training. They're fit. They're used to playing in what you call the red zone. They're used to executing their skill set with fatigue, and we probably don't want it to get that frantic.
Yeah,
you know?
and like that pass that Finn Russell throws, you know, the week before, Eddie Jones kind of gets in Patchell's head and says Joseph is going to be in your eye line every time, and he basically didn't try and throw that pass. But Russell will always take that extra bit of risk, and like there probably is chances there for Ireland in terms of picking off the pass. Like in terms of Eddie Jones, do you think did that actually work? Do you think that was part of his game plan to put it in his mind?
Yeah, I think it was. For sure it was.
He seemed almost sarcastic when it came to Russell, where he was, after what he had said about Patchell, where he was clearly trying to put pressure on him, he then sort of shirked those similar types of questions about Russell and was saying, no, he's a good player. He's a good player, but it still seemed barbed. I don't know whether that was just because it's Eddie Jones and he's a bit of a Burke, or because he was actually trying to...
I think Russell has got more international experience than Patchell has. I felt it was harsh on Patchell because Patchell's actually played quite a bit of high-level rugby. And I don't think you can... I think as well, you can't go to the well every week with that kind of stuff, picking a player and nominate him. So I think he obviously felt, you know, it worked against Wales. Let's just put it in the pocket for a while. And I don't think he obviously maybe got a little bit of a media backlash about it, and I don't think he's going to go every week and pick a player and say, he's inexperienced. I think Finn Russell has more experience, and maybe he felt that he could get to him without speaking about him in the media.
Yeah, like Finn Russell, he's going to throw those passes every single week. Like we'll look at a couple of examples here. Like even in your examples, we see Scotland getting those big gains in the 15-metre channels, and that's so big for them. Like their ball carrying forwards aren't particularly explosive. No. They don't tend to make a lot of meters per carry. And actually, I think between the two 15-metre channels, they're more focused on that tempo.
Yes.
So get through the rucks, get a quick recycle. Even if you're not making progress, you're kind of narrowing up that defence, and then they save their creative play for the 15-metre channels so often. We're going to see a couple of examples here. Finn Russell there in first receiver, he's going to get on the ball. This is in 40 seconds in, and already he's going to throw that big long pass out in front, beating Nathan Hughes there on the edge, and going to that width with a risky pass. A lot of out-halves wouldn't like to throw early in a game. We see here again, they've narrowed up England with some of those carries. They haven't made particularly big gain line advances, but they've managed to get them tied around that ruck. Finn Russell's going to come around the corner, and again he's going to throw that pass across the face of a defender. Ireland might see opportunities there. I'm going to go and try and pick off that pass, but if he beats you, you're in big trouble. This time they don't convert into a really clean line break, but again massive gains down the left. This is against the All Blacks, and you picked out Ryan Wilson playing 9 the last time. Again, they got a forward in there playing 9, scrum half off the base of the ruck, and then Henry Purgos can hit a little bit wider, hit Russell, and allows them just to get into that 15-metre channel where they're so creative. Forward linking pass, and here's Hugh Jones, who also can distribute, in fairness. He's a lethal line runner. We'll take a look at a couple of examples later on. But now they're into this 15-metre channel. Now it's so difficult for the defenders. Every mistake is magnified out here. And one of the things they're really good at, you can see all that space there. But it's hard even with that drift defence for Hogg, with all his pace, to beat them. So he sticks that little grubber. And it's so late. He's getting tackled just as he kicks. But this is a repeated trend in their play. Work hard, get the tempo up in between the two 15-metre channels, and then go to Hogg, Russell and Hugh Jones to create. You see Tommy Seymour get back on the ball, pass inside, and you've had this brilliant support play from the scrum half getting all the way there, and Jones as well. That's another element of it. So everyone on the inside is going to work really hard to get across into that 15-metre channel and give them a chance to finish off. That's against the All Blacks, one of the best defences around. Another chance here in the last minute against the All Blacks where they almost stole a famous victory. Again, a linking pass from forward to Russell, just to give him that chance, because you're quite close to the touchline, the initial ruck there. So generally, it's hard to get over to the other 15-metre, but that little bit of extra depth gives them a chance to make the pass. And probably these guys here are actually a little bit too deep this time, because you can see here on the outside edge the All Blacks are in trouble. If they're up a little bit flatter, I think they actually possibly could convert that into a try. But again, it's Jones on the ball, inside pass to Stuart Hogg, and his pace is unbelievable. You're seeing that support again, guys working really hard in that zone of the pitch, because that's a massive focus for them. Unfortunately for them this time, well, it was a brilliant tackle from Bowden Barrett, but the offload goes forward. So I think you're going to see that formula again. Every single game they've played under Townsend, work hard, work with tempo in between the 15s. Your forwards might not win the game line every time, but you're always going to try and get those 2-on-2s, 3-on-3s in the outside channel. It's not even about creating a 2-on-1 anymore. It's about giving Hogg a chance to use his footwork, Jones with his pace, and those little grubber kicks as well. So I think it's a real threat for
Ireland. I think it's less organised than probably some of the other teams in the Six Nations. But what they have is core philosophies that get the ball to their talented X-factor players in areas of the field where there's potential mismatches. So you spoke there about maybe they're a little bit too deep, but that depth could challenge us because they have width both sides of the field, so they stretch your defence, or if your defence is narrow, they have opportunities to go there. But also because they've got two waves of attack, you can't come in and shut the ball down. So if you've only got one wave, one line in attack, it's easy for the defence to go and get it. But by having a second wave a little bit deeper, it makes you question it makes you it's a harder decision to make as a defender, and that's what Joe's been talking about, is that we haven't been making good decisions, and some people are coming up and in, some people are staying out. And if you're going to say what type of attack would test our progress in that defence, well, it's a Scottish one. Of all the teams in this, Wales are trying to play a bit more, and they are playing with more width, and they cause problem for us. But they're still learning that, and it's personnel driven. Whereas Scotland, since Gregor have come in, and in fairness to Vern had that philosophy as well. So they're well used to that. They're probably a little bit further in their development than Wales. England will threaten us differently. France threaten us around their physicality. So this is a big test for us in terms of how much we've improved.
Yeah, because we're going to look at examples from defence just in a couple of minutes, but that's exactly where they actually got those early tries against Ireland in Murrayfield last year. Like, a lot of people are talking about Ireland's defence now, linking it back to 2015 even, because Ireland do tend to concede the tries otherwise. Would you go along with that? Do you think it's been a trend since
it's different? I think it's different. Obviously, we were getting caught a little bit on the outside, but I don't think it's the same issue. I think some of it you're going to point out is a little bit around work rate issue and actually helping each other out and actually seeing where the threats are. Whereas I think against say Argentina in the World Cup, we just got caught, really narrow, but we didn't actually seem to be. That seemed to be a system error. Whereas I think the system now is able to handle those types of attacks. It's just, unfortunately, over the last couple of games, we haven't implemented the system properly.
Yeah, we'll look at a couple of examples. Like going back to Murrayfield last year, they left themselves in an awful position, 14-0 down after the first quarter. They did manage to get that lead back, and I think that's why they rankled so much with them, because they gave up that winning position. But like defence, obviously it's hard to defend at international level, but it's such a simple thing that the smallest little error, close to the ruck especially, can make life so difficult for the guys out wide. Jacob Stockdale did make poor decisions. He's made poor decisions in a number of games, but he's being so stressed because at times guys further in the line where it's not as apparent, they're probably maybe playing a little bit safe with their spacing, they're not folding around the corner. And we're going to look at an example here. This is the first try last year in Murrayfield. Scotland are picking and going at the line. They've had multiple phases here, they're on to phase 10. And if we just roll it back there, just before that carry, you can already kind of see the issue for Ireland. They've so many bodies stacked up on this side of the ruck. There's like 7 guys there, 3 attackers. So already you're getting that kind of mismatch in defence, and already you're seeing Gary Ringrose on the outside here just be a little bit exposed. Scotland go through that hard carrying phase, and there's just the communication from Ireland, from these guys around the kind of pillar post positions. They're just not getting their head up and scanning the pitch, kind of demanding guys to fold around the corner. And as Scotland eventually realise that, Finn Russell sends in that trigger call. It's too late now. Ireland are making a move. You see Carney here going, Zebo going. But already the damage is done. And Finn Russell, we talk about a risk-taking pass. He knows that if he can get it into that outside channel, it's actually a bit of a bounce pass here, that they're going to do damage. Ringrose really left in kind of no man's land. Through no fault of his own, it's a very difficult position for him to be in. And we see the reverse angle here. It's quite damning for Ireland's point of view. Just one attacker on the Scottish side, and you got 6 there. full of bodies on one side of the ruck where there's no actual attacking threat, and they're trying to fold around the corner too late. There goes Carney and Zebo. So that was probably just a little communication error, fatigue close to your line. And you can see, Ringrose slips here, but there's actually another Scottish attacker they probably could even kick past, whatever. It was a really kind of glaring opportunity. But just a simple thing from Ireland, guys getting their head up close to the ruck and folding around. This is the second try. Scotland come off a line-out platform, and Russell hits Josh Strauss in midfield. He makes a carry. First of all, you probably don't want to get your two centres stuck into that tackle, but that's what it takes to get him down. And CJ Sander gets over the ball here. He's going to turn into a 6-7 second ruck, like ample time to get your defence perfectly set, to get your fold, to decide if you're going to hold on one side, get around the corner, and also to get your spacing right. And Ireland do get a fold around the corner, but as we play away, you're going to see they're probably just a little bit overstacked again on that side where there's no real Scottish threat. That said, they have the bodies in the defensive line, but it's just a spacing issue. The other angle is going to show it better, but Sean O'Brien is that third defender out from ruck, so he's ideally going to take the first receiver. But unfortunately for Ireland, Ian Henderson just gets dragged in a little bit there. That drags Paddy Jackson in. And again, it's that man on the outside edge, Keith Earls, we're going to see, who's kind of left in the shit, let's say, by that kind of poor spacing just inside him. Again, he's going to struggle to get across and fill in. They've left with a 2-on-1 on the outside, and Carney decides to go. Keith Earls can't get back to make the tackle, and Stuart Hogg goes and scores another try. You're 20 minutes in, already two tries down. We can see the spacing here. There's just, you want to get an even spacing across your line. You want to get everyone numbered up. And Sean O'Brien, he's well marking up there on the first receiver, Finn Russell. But then you're just getting this little spacing issue here, little gaps opening up between guys, and Ian Henderson kind of biting in there, drags in Paddy Jackson as well. And again, they're just left in a poor position on the outside, and it's so hard for those defenders with that pace of Stuart Hogg to recover and make the tackle. This is against Italy, and listen, there's definitely a missed tackle from Dan Levy. He should have done better here, but we're just interested in Kieran Marmion's communication there. He's calling for that fold, so he's actually giving clear instructions for guys to get around the corner. Quinn Roux does come, but again, it's a little spacing thing. You're going to see just when we go into the wide angle, Kieran Marmion here is screaming for Toner, just get a little bit wider. Get a little bit wider. There's no clear threat on the inside of the ruck there, on the inside of first receiver, so we can spread a little bit further across. That doesn't happen, and Levy is just slightly delayed. Ideally, Marmion will be pushing him early there, saying, go, you go to the next man, but he can't let him go too early, and Levy just gets a little bit upfield. It's poor defensively. He should still make that tackle. But those guys on the inside can probably just help them a little bit more by shuffling out. You see it again. You probably could have got one of those bodies around the corner even and made it a little bit easier. But Levy's left in a bad position, and he doesn't do well in that situation. Again, last man drawn in, and they score a try that kind of originates in the 15-metre channel. This is against Wales. The first try, the shingle try, like Joe Schmidt will pick out every little detail. There's Bigger, he's going to go up and win that ball in the air. Dan Levy's job is to kind of shepherd him, make sure he can't get up and have a one-on-one with Carney. He needs to run that line just in front of Bigger, accelerate there, just kind of impede him, shepherd him through, but instead Bigger gets ahead of him, you can see there, and now he's going to get up in the air for a one-on-one. Carney won't be happy with that, but Bigger's brilliant in the air. You're seeing now already there's Sexton saying, fold around the corner, guys. And then a second later, Dan Levy does the same. But there's no response. None of these guys get around the corner. And just one body extra can allow everyone to shuffle out. If you're going to come with that line speed, then you're in a much better position. What happens really is Ireland gets slightly disjointed. These three inside defenders come up with a bit of line speed. These two guys sit off, so you're kind of getting disjointed thinking.
That's the key there. So obviously, it's come from a situation where Dan Bigger's caught his own kick. So our defence is bound to be a little bit unstructured.
Yeah.
You're right about the fact that Sexton's talking about people to fold, but this is where you can't get aggressive. Ireland just need to stay together here. Those three need to work with these two until we get another breakdown and we get a chance to get set. But we seem to be looking for those big hits, big collisions
every time.
And you got to pick and choose your moments, and I think that'll be the message from Andy Farrell.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that was stupid. It was a poor decision to come up and try and shut it down because we know Wales can go wide.
Yeah, and then you've got these guys who wanted to sit off. Just use the touchline this once. We'll make a tackle on the right edge. Then we'll get our line speed when we're organised. But it's just kind of disjointed thinking between them. Keith Earls comes forward, and you're going to see Scott Williams making that pass over the top to get down.
In fairness to Keith Earls, he's got to mirror what happens inside him.
Exactly.
So once the first 3 guys get up aggressive, well then the next, the principle are everyone mirrors that.
Yeah.
But it happens at different times because the guys outside those first 3 are expecting to go softer, more passive. So they get up, they try and catch up, and then Earls reacts to effectively what started in here. And it's good attack, but that'll be what Andy Farrell is. He's going to look for everyone to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And have more consistency and more accuracy in terms of communication about what type of line speed to bring.
Yeah, and just giving those guys on the outside edge a chance to make a better decision. We see here, like you can see Dan Levy. I'll just roll it back there. You can see him in the top right corner there. He's kind of signalling for that fold. Again, he gets a response. Guys get around the corner, but again, that spacing. You can see the gap there. There's 4 defenders close to the ruck. 1, 2, 3, 4 there. But they don't just get that extra step out.
If you look at that, I mean, there's no threat around the ruck.
Exactly.
That's the key. We're not basically adapting our spacing based on what the attacker's shown.
Yeah.
So it's like you showed the first try against Scotland last year where we had 6 on the blind side opposite 1. That's just poor. We got to scan and then we got to adapt. So here, if Wales have a pot of 2 forwards, playing off 9 there, well then obviously we can afford to be a bit narrow. But there we're just basically we're putting in place a standard, your own 22 type defence, but we're not actually adapting that to what the opposition threat is, which is obviously ability to go a little bit wider.
Yeah, and they go out the back door like typical Wales. Hamwin Jones goes out the back, and now Bundyaki does get out to make that tackle, but Stockdale's already made his read. We mentioned earlier on, this is actually 3 minutes of ball in play time, so this is where you get those poor decisions, especially from an inexperienced guy. You see basically they've got 2 guys. Stockdale's shooting in on a man who's already marked up. Even if he can shoot there, he makes that pass a little bit more difficult, but they go over the top. Like, he should have done better on the outside edge, but I just think those issues further in will be even more relevant in terms of giving those guys on the outside edge a better chance to make the tackle and to make a good decision. Last one we're going to look at, you see Conor Murray there. He's come from a tackle. He's going to get back into the line. I think Jack Conan just doesn't readjust to that. You're going to see Murray reverse into the line there, and he's again that kind of third man out from the ruck. He'll feel he could have got that first receiver. It's a midfield ruck, it's very hard to get line speed on those midfield rucks. Jack Conan, in fairness, is just off the bench. He wants to make an impact, and you see him here. He kind of hairs up in front of the line and kind of bites down inside on Hadley Parks, and that leaves a 3-on-2 on the outside. 3-on-2 on the outside, it's just a bad read from Conan. I think he may even pay the price for that. He would have been eviscerated in the review for an error like that, especially off a midfield ruck. And now you've got a 3-on-2. Again, Ireland will probably feel they could have managed this better. The 3 attackers, 2 defenders. Scott Williams decides to take on Bundyaki, but he looks comfortable enough in making that tackle. Unfortunately, Ferguson McFadden decides to bite in very early, and making it even worse, he doesn't stop the ball. If you're going to make that decision, you have to stop the ball. But he gets the offload away, Williams, and Navidi's able to draw the final defender, draw in Carney and hit Evans on the outside edge. So again, it's a little individual error within the system. Probably a guy wanting to get a bit of line speed. You can see it again there from Conan. If he can just ease off a little bit, drift on out, Murray's going to make that tackle, and they're in great shape to actually stop that Welsh attack. Again, Ferguson McFadden biting on the outside edge. So there's little fixes. There aren't clear patterns, but there are things just around the ruck in terms of guys getting their heads up and scanning.
Yeah, I think if you look at some of those examples there, so like Jacob Stockdale at provincial level, he probably comes in and that guy hasn't got the skill set to get that pass away, and it's a man and ball tackle. Jack Conan there, potentially playing for Leinster in the Pro 14 or for Europe, he actually gets up and makes a tackle 7 or 8 yards behind the gain line, and Ferg is off the bench. He's trying to make an impact, and he comes shooting in. It's like we're maybe overly emotionally charged to try and make big things happen. Whereas if you look at our attacking mindset, it's actually grind teams down. We're very patient in attack, but defensively, for some reason, over the course of these couple of games, I think we've looked for the big kill early, or an all or nothing type decision, and unfortunately, the teams we played against have executed pretty well.
Yeah.
If you give international players 2-on-1s or 3-on-2 down a 50-metre channel, they execute pretty well. Whereas potentially at provincial level, you can still snuff it out. You can actually make them make an error by pressure. And I think if you look at the tries we've conceded in this championship, it's kind of when we've been in control of the game. So even the Teddy Thomas try against France, I know we were only 1 score up, but we never felt really threatened. You know, so it was a poor. We didn't. It was a reasonably poor exit, and we just didn't get our numbers right, and then bang. You know, but again, at provincial level, you don't come up against someone like Teddy Thomas who can actually exploit that, and you get away with it. Against Wales, we were kind of controlling the game. We got maybe 2 scores ahead, and then we conceded. So I wonder, and against Italy, the game was won when we conceded. So is it lapses of concentration? Is it 2 things? Is it, you know, a lapse of concentration when we're comfortable? And then secondly, is it inexperienced players trying to make big things happen too early?
Yeah, that's really interesting because like that final quarter is going to be an issue because Scotland, they'll still bring the tempo. Really interesting comment from Joe Schmidt. We were asking him basically for a tribute on Jamie Heaslip, and one of the things he mentioned was Jamie was always there in the final quarter. And he didn't say it specifically about these games, but he said Jamie hasn't been there in the final quarters the last couple of weeks. A guy who, you know, never settles, never goes, oh, we've won this game. He's seen it enough times, and they're probably missing his leadership. He was one of the massive leaders. You always saw him in those huddles. You know, if they concede that first try against Wales, we cut this out, let's focus back in. So that final quarter is definitely a big challenge for Ireland, and they're definitely missing.
Yeah, and I think what Jamie was brilliant at was actually coaching during the game. So, like, if you ever listen to a ref Mike when Ireland were playing or Leinster were playing with Mike Ross, effectively Jamie was basically shouting at him the whole game, get the pillar, wider Rossi. But he just didn't do that for Rossi, he did it for a multitude of players. And when you're fatigued in those last 20 minutes, it's not, probably if he's having to talk in the huddle, it's too late. You know, you've conceded a try. Whereas what he was very good at was actually managing situations and making sure, you know, you showed some clips of guys waving, get one more in the fold, but no one reacted. Whereas Jamie had there's different types of communication. He can speak a lot, but if the player doesn't listen, you know, and it's not concise and it's not with authority, you know, you won't get the action you want. And I think that's an example of an area we're just lacking a little bit at the moment, of that clarity of communication, which in defence, like the best defenders actually very rarely have to make a tackle. You know, like Brian O'Driscoll was a brilliant defender, but what he did was he painted a picture for the attack that made them do what he least wanted them to do. You know, or he made sure that he was never left short on the inside, so he could get off the line, and they, you know, Finn Russell type wouldn't throw that pass. So that's the difference at the moment. We're not communicating well enough to give us, you know, a much better picture to take away the attack's threat. Well,
they need guys to step up in that regard. Like, you're missing Sean O'Brien, another guy who's always over the ref mic, real kind of chirpy voice. But they need people to step up. Bundyaki has to step up and be really communicative. Johnny Sexton does it already, but there definitely need to be more guys doing that last quarter especially.
Super. It's like being picked last in PE there. It was really enjoyable. Well done. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the teams, get the lads' predictions, and the rest. We'll also have questions from yourselves as well. But we'll chat to you in 15 minutes. Cheers. We'll kick off again there. So I should have said at the start, by the way, that when I mentioned that we're looking for questions from you guys at the end, we are also giving away a pair of tickets for the weekend's game, courtesy of Volkswagen. I know. So the best question, we'll leave it up to the big man beside me to decide what the best question is. You don't mind, do you? No, Murray. So yeah, pair of tickets with thanks to Volkswagen we're giving away for Ireland versus Scotland. So we'll take your questions at the end for the two guys here. And we'll kick off with teams. I think you can almost predict the Ireland team. It's maybe some of the more contentious decisions might actually be on the bench. You mentioned Jack Conan's kind of poor read there against Wales, and he might fall foul of that a little bit in Joe Schmidt's eyes. Maybe Geordie Murphy might sneak onto the bench there. Yeah,
possibly, especially considering that the breakdown, which Bernard's going to look at, is going to be such a key area. Geordie probably gives you a bit more. Geordie Murphy gives you a bit more in that area coming off the bench. If they're going to be relentlessly attacking that breakdown, looking for those turnovers they thrive off. Apart from that, Furlong and Henderson are back. Massive boost. To have two world-class guys come back into your team, the dynamism of Henderson, Furlong as well, obviously a set-piece time, and they also give you a little bit more in terms of their passing ability. They've moved the ball quite frequently actually in this championship when they've played. I guess the big one that's going to change things up is Gary Ringrose coming back in at 13. A different player to Chris Farrell, who did brilliantly, so unlucky to miss out, having been so outstanding on his Six Nations debut. But Ringrose probably offers a little bit different attacking kind of focus. You know, he has that outside break, his footwork's maybe a little bit better, he's got a darting kind of acceleration. So it probably gives Ireland a gain in that area. I guess the big one for him is defensively coming back in. When he came back from that shoulder injury initially, you know, he's slipping off a couple of tackles, but he has actually put on a bit of size. You can actually see it in the photo. He's put on a bit of weight while he's had that while he's had that ankle surgery and rehab. So I think he's a brilliant defensive reader, so now it's about him getting those shots on. But you certainly don't lose much. You've already lost 3 outside centres. I don't think many other teams could cope as well, and it probably shows the depth coming through. So yeah, a couple of changes for Ireland, but relatively settled overall.
Chris Farrell's a man you know well, obviously, and as Murray mentioned, unlucky. Like he seemed, given the performance he put in against Wales, it seemed like he was on the precipice of not necessarily becoming a mainstay, but becoming just a really key figure. And I'm sure he will be when he returns to fitness. But what I mean by that is almost just sort of embedding himself properly in the public conscience, if you will, as a really important player for Ireland. Just that injury break kind of sets him back again.
It's cruel timing, and obviously he's going to be out for a little while. But I think at least now he's shown it. He's had a start in the Six Nations and against a quality side, and he's shown how good he is. You know, when he was very good for us in France for 2 seasons. A lot of top 14 clubs were interested in him. I know Saracens were interested in him. Joe was very much involved in getting him back and convinced him that to come back to Ireland to put himself available to play for Ireland. I think in November, you know, he had a really solid game with Bundy, and then obviously to do it at Six Nations level, it's a killer for him in terms of morally, but for his morale. But at least now he's done it, and he's not wondering, am I good enough to play this level? And Ireland, like Gary Ringrose, is getting an opportunity now to come in, and he's potentially world class. So we're incredibly well resourced in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's not long ago that Andy Farrell said Gary Ringrose was very close to going on a Lions tour. So you're not losing a whole lot. You're getting something different, certainly in terms of his attacking play, his intelligence, and we're talking about defensive communicators. That's a big challenge for him now. 11 caps. Can he turn into that guy like Brian Driscoll, who was just brilliant on the outside edge, feeding in that information, getting those guys to drag their spacing a little bit wider, and then getting the line speed and getting that shot on. So great chance for him. It's opened up probably a little bit sooner than expected in this championship.
Yeah, and I think as well, I was actually quite lucky. I know people say, I could have done an extra game against the Scarlets. Obviously that was called off because of the snow, but sometimes when you come back from an injury, you know, you get through your first game and then there's a bit of a dip in terms of how you feel physically the second week. So he actually got a chance to get a little bit of downtime, and now he'll hopefully be on an upward curve. So they call it the bounce. It's like a racehorse. I'm into my racehorses. If a horse first time out, they can run great after a long layoff, but then second week, second race out, they're a little bit down themselves, or a little bit weak in terms of energy level. So potentially that game called off against the Scarlets because of the snow could actually be good for him, and he gets 2 weeks prep going into a test match.
That's interesting because Eddie Jones was talking about that with Ben Teo, and I thought he was just using an easy excuse to drop him, but
we do use that as an excuse to drop him. But we use lots of things.
It's a thing. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Apparently.
As for a partnership, I suppose Aki and Ringrose is probably something we're less familiar with than even Aki and Farrell, given that they played 2 tests together. Like, what do they bring as a pair? Obviously, it's a kind of maybe a dynamism, and as you said, that sort of outside break that Ringrose can bring to the table. Like, can we become a more potent attacking unit with the two of them in the centre than we might have with Aki and Farrell, even though they're not necessarily similar players? They are both kind of more on the physical side, more so than...
Yeah, there's probably a little bit more balance there now. And like Ireland have, they have key kind of cornerstones for their game plan that every single time there's non-negotiable. But Joe Schmidt does tend to mix it up slightly. I think against Scotland it'll be a little bit looser. Against Wales, when they got into the 22, it was all about battering their way over the try line, really clever kind of latching. We're going to look at some of the running lines a little bit later on, but it was very direct, it was very power based, because they felt they could kind of just overpower that slightly less experienced pack. I think it'll be slightly different again against the Scots. A couple more of those link passes at the back that we'd seen before against Italy, and back in November as well. And a guy like Gary Ringrose really thrives in those circumstances where he is on that second wave, where he's got time to use his footwork, which is exceptional. And his passing game, I know, is the Southern Kings, but he had a couple of lovely touches as well in that game. So yeah, I'm excited to see him in what hopefully will be a slightly more expansive kind
Don't
of
underestimate the Southern Kings.
Don't mention the war.
Apologise.
He's not one of your big signings you're planning in the next couple of weeks, Ringrose. No. On the Scotland side of things, only one change. Blair Kinghorn comes in for Tommy Seymour, and apart from sounding like a peripheral character in Game of Thrones and or a porn star, he can actually play a little bit of ball as well. 6'5", but I mean, in fairness, he's coming on. He's coming on to the right wing for Scotland. He usually operates as a fullback, but he has been training, I think, in Townsend setup for the entire Six Nations as a winger, that they were prepared to use him there.
Yeah, I mean, he's an exceptionally exciting player. He's been absolutely brilliant in the Pro 14. As you say, at fullback, maybe it kind of hints at what Scotland are attempting to do, or attempting to negate with his height and his strength in the air up against Stockdale. But he's also extremely elusive. He's played sevens for Scotland and excelled there. I think his coach is comparing him to a giraffe when he gets up to top speed, so not the most pleasing aesthetic style of running, but he's a really exciting talent. Only 21, he played 3 years of under 20s, so he's been on their pathway for a long time. Get him through the sevens, get him into Edinburgh, and I don't think it's by accident that he's coming into this game. You know, obviously there's an injury there, but he's absolutely been prepared all the way, and he definitely will link up well with Stuart Hogg. He loves to counter-attack. He thrives on those kick returns, where Scotland are so strong, so it does actually kind of boost him a little bit in that area. Yeah,
I mean, normally when you have a 21-year-old coming into an international setup for their test debut, you kind of think he's a guy you can put under pressure maybe, but like in Kinghorn, he started for probably similar to your setup at the Dragons then, where they're bringing through teenagers, but at Edinburgh he started, I think, his first game at 18. He's played 59 times for them, scored 13 tries, I think. Now, it's not obviously international level, but he's clearly got a sort of a big game mentality, or at least he's got broad enough shoulders to have played from that early age.
Good stats, Gav.
Yeah, thank you very much, Murray.
I mean, you're going to test him no matter what. He's 21. Like, if you're the opposition coach, what are you thinking? Let's put a high ball in him early on. Sure. Test him under one of those box kicks. You got to do it. You got to see if he's got the mettle for it. Get a contact on him, see how he reacts. But I do think he's pretty well built for a big boy and well able to move as well. So I don't think he's a glaring weakness, but Ireland will absolutely go and look at him early on.
Are they missing much in Seymour?
Yeah, he's worked really well in that back three in those 15-metre channels. We saw an example early on when he gets onto the front foot. He's brilliant, really good in the air at times as well. Does have the odd error as we've seen in a couple of recent games as well. So yeah, they're missing his experience, and he's more proven certainly. But I don't think they're losing too much with Blair Kinghorn. I look at that pack and I just think that's the area that Ireland can really get on top. You know, they're absolute ferocious warriors, but. And we saw that against England when they were well up for it. But I think the Irish maul, the Irish rucking against their breakdown is going to be better. I think that might be an area where Ireland will really thrive.
Bernard, you're going to take a look at Scotland's threat at the breakdown.
Yeah, just obviously it was a key factor in them beating England. And England didn't help themselves. Their work rate on the ground post tackle was poor. They were quite a static target for the Scottish jackler. They often had two-man rucks, so you know what most teams will do is they'll scan what kind of shape the attacker in, and generally if your first support is a back, you know, they'll look to flood that breakdown or go after it hard, or if there's a gap, if there's too much distance between that third support player, they'll go after it. Against England, Scotland seemed to have a mentality of they're actually going to just go after every ruck, and they got six turnovers. They slowed down the ball that they didn't win, and they made England look really inept in that competition in that game. Now I think that's a factor. Some of that's a factor of how the Aviva Premiership is refereed, that you don't get reward for jackling, which means you can win your own ruck ball with 1 and 2 players. But they got exposed at international level. I'm sure it's going to been a big work on for England, obviously post this game. But from Scotland's point of view, they got massive gain from that. If you look at how Wales defended against Ireland, they very rarely went after the breakdown. So Ireland had easy ball and quick ball, and Ireland's power game was able to, I suppose, grind Wales down. So it's going to be interesting how I think Ireland are very efficient at the breakdown. But if we get our numbers wrong, if we get our first support, if his clean out technique isn't good, they'll get. And also, if there's to pay the referee, because Nigel Owens does.
Yeah,
does
Wayne
favour
Barnes referee.
Wayne Barnes referee a little bit differently, but Nigel Owens does favour the defensive side. But if you're scouting Scotland, you just look at their effect here. You know, it's a chop tackle, and Hamish Watson's just on that. He's clamped on. And you've got John Bartley just getting in support here. Again, I don't know how to use this. There, yeah. He's just getting in there and actually supporting Hamish Watson, clamping onto him, and they get a clean turnover after 4 minutes. So that just gives them a massive boost in terms of their energy, and also frustrates England again here. You know, just a one-off runner. You'd expect England. It's only 2 yards from the previous ruck. You expect England to be able to deal with that quickly, and you see Hamish Watson chopping from the outside, and Adam Gilchrist. You know, usually second rows aren't the best jacklers in the game. I know Tyburn is phenomenal in that area, but you know, generally they aren't. It's usually your back rows or your smaller front row types. But he just gets in there. You know, Courtney Laws isn't as aggressive. He loses the race. He's there. He's their second. Body height's poor, and he just gets in there and he rides the jackal. Launcher, he comes in, and it's another turnover, and it's just it gave Scotland so much possession, and it meant England could never get that quick ball that they needed to actually threaten them. That's John Bartley. The difference between Scotland and probably other teams is that their whole back row have that ability of jackal. So it's Watson, it's Ryan Wilson, it's John Bartley. You've got Gilchrist and you've got McInally. So I would say in their pack they've got 5 players who are very, very good technically, and they just destroyed. There, Barkley, he sees the first supporters late, he comes in, gets on that ball, and that led to a try. But also it just gave them such energy, and again the second half, England start chasing the game. England, you would say Ireland won't attack like that. They always have support around the ball. But if we do get our numbers wrong, if we do get our organisation wrong, Scotland will exploit that, and Joe will be, he'll be hammering our defence this week, but also he'll be hammering our breakdown work, because that performance against England was probably as impressive breakdown defensive performance as we've seen in the last 12 months at any game at international level.
Because other teams have been kind of standing off a little bit more since they've tweaked the laws.
Attacking they changed the laws a little bit or they changed the law over the summer that the tackler has to get out. In the old days, last year, you could stay that side. There's got to be clear release. He's got to get out of the zone. So what Wales have 2 calls basically, or most teams have 2 calls. If you spot an opportunity, you flood that and go after it hard. If not, you just call something like ice and just stay out. Right. And but Scotland seem to, it suits them, but it also means if they put 2 or 3 players into that defensive ruck, and we can get that ball away quickly, it'll open up opportunities obviously wider, because they've lost numbers in their front line.
I think it also shows how important a team's shape is, because England play with those. They play with 2-man forward pods, so 1 carrier, 1 rucking player, and as you were saying earlier on, another guy has to get from the previous ruck to be that second arriving player. Whereas Ireland, you have a ball carrier, and you always have what they call the left barrel, right barrel. Yeah. 2 guys are always there to clear ruck. The third man is the guard over the ball. So there's always those 3 roles in pretty much every ruck, if not 4 guys. Yeah. Sometimes they have too many in a ruck, actually, Ireland. So when you do those ruck stats, you're kind of tagging on a few extra ruck inspectors or whatever. But they place such a focus on just retaining that possession.
Yeah, because we were willing to put extra bodies in if we have to, because players for our edge on the side of security rather than holding weight or whatever, we can lose. We can get quite narrow in defence in attack as well, but we very rarely lose the ball. We got stripped a couple of times against Wales in the first half in their 22, but that was pre-ruck. That was actually going to ground. Wales got in and stripped the ball out of us. Yeah. So I think we, in theory, if we attack like we have been attacking, it'll be hard for them to get the same kind of gains that they got against England. Yeah,
I mean, it's just fascinating to see how those different philosophies marry up, because when England get a good 2-man ruck with that second guy coming around, like there's so many different options for Farrell and Ford to pick from. There's always a double decoy from forwards. There's always an extra man out the back. So it's about your priorities, and for Joe Schmidt it always is that ruck is always central.
But because England were playing that sort of Premiership type where they're only committing 2 men to a ruck, and like Scotland clearly felt, and Gregor Townsend clearly felt, we can go after him in this area. But because then Ireland commit more men, do Scotland then have to completely adjust their approach? Like, can you chance it by just piling men in again?
Obviously I think that they will, when they analyse Ireland, they'll say they have to basically make more decisions based on the scenario. Rather than we can go after every ruck, because if they go after every ruck, they'll get caught. They'll get caught too narrow, and we'll also they got to adapt to Wayne Barnes. If he, he's one of the referees in the Premiership, which is why England probably don't have that consistency. The advantage for Ireland and Scotland and Wales of the Guinness Pro 14 is it's much harder to manage the referees and have them all with the same philosophy. So if the Viva Premiership referees meet up every Monday in Twickenham, they review their games. It's really easy for them to get a consistent style of refereeing. But with Italians, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, Greg Garner's the head of the referees for Pro 14. Obviously he can do his reports and reviews, but it's so hard to get that consistency because the Irish referees will referee to a certain extent the Irish way, the Scottish. So our players are used to adapting week on week in Europe or in the Pro 14 to a different refereeing style, whereas potentially for the English referees, English players, they've got a much more consistent style in the Viva Premiership, which doesn't help them when they go into Europe, or help them when they go to international level.
Yeah, and Ireland's discipline has been massive in this championship. Like whenever they're successful, their penalty count is extremely low. I think even at scrum time they've given maybe one penalty away. Around the pitch it's been again at a peak. Like there's another core part of Joe Schmidt's philosophy. Like if you're not giving away penalties, a team like Wales can't get 3 minutes of ball in play time. They can't drag you side to side. So that's like those little things are massive for Joe Schmidt, and we're seeing now the importance of them. While they're scoring tries, yes, they're also getting their discipline absolutely bang on.
Just to continue the England bashing very briefly, were they a little bit complacent then in not adjusting? Because like it seemed that they at no point in that Scotland game decided or made a conscious decision to commit more men. It was just like, this is what we've brought. There was no real plan B at the breakdown.
I think the same thing happened if you look at what was it called, Fox, when Italy decided not to contest the ruck and come around the side, and I think Eddie Jones said afterwards, we weren't good enough about getting that message on. Remember, it took to half time. And potentially here, I don't think it's the message from Eddie Jones. I mean, they do take that risk. Effectively, what they want is to support the third man to come from inside, so they can hold their weight on the outside. So if he's just a little bit off, or what you'll actually see is that Scotland sometimes trapped him a little bit extra at that last ruck, so it was quite technical. So he was supposed to come earlier, but he got held into the breakdown. You can see a bit of a row on one of those where, so they know where that inside support's coming from. So effectively it was individual error or really cute play by Scotland. Because if you say, listen, start flooding that ruck from outside, well then you lose your attacking shape. So Eddie Jones obviously felt we just got to implement our style properly. And again, the rest will take care of itself.
Like people are kind of sneering at England, saying, this shows they're not going to compete with the All Blacks at the World Cup. I actually think it's the best thing in a way that could have happened to him, because now he has to question everything. He has to question how reactive his team is, how they adapt to things on the pitch. He has to question, personnel. Is Harley the right captain? Is he going to lead us out of difficult situations like that? His open side, the breakdown is massive. Chris Robshaw still is 7, so I think we're going to see changes there. And while it is a setback in terms of their momentum and all of that, it definitely poses a lot of questions for Eddie Jones, and I think that's a good thing.
I think in 2003 they won a World Cup without winning a couple of Grand Slams going into it. I mean, and they're still very much alive in this competition. I know we're all saying, we can win the championship this weekend. Yeah, we can, but also we might have to go to Twickenham to win the championship. So I wouldn't write off England. They had a tough afternoon against a Scottish team who are talented, but they're still very much contenders for this championship and a World Cup.
Absolutely.
Murray, you're going to look at some of Ireland's clever running lines, I believe.
Yeah, well, we actually just want to start with Hugh Jones. Like we've spoken about ringrose there, but Jones, as you mentioned earlier on, his try scoring ability is freakish. His pace is exceptional, but also his ability to pick out lines. His running lines are really subtle at times, but really effective. You spoke about scanning in defence, but he's brilliant at scanning in attack. He's always got his head up, and he's really good at reacting to little cues. So in this instance, he's on the ground there. Actually, they've come on the counter-attack, Scotland, and they're going to play in field a couple of rucks just as they come back at the French. There's Gilchrist hammering it up, and Hugh Jones is just getting off his feet here. They're going to play in field again to Johnny Gray. Just here, he's going to make another carry in field, but now you've got Hugh Jones back on his feet. Sorry, I'll just circle him there. And he's a player who's really good at conserving his energy. I'd love to see his GPS stats, because people talk about that huge work rate, but he tends to be often walking around the pitch waiting for his chance to pounce, and then those explosive moments are even more powerful almost. So he's kind of walking across the pitch there. You can see him now, he's got his head scanning. So he's not actually running and sprinting to get into a position, he's just waiting for the opportunity. And the opportunity, as we run on slowly, presents itself here. He sees that Buck Cease is going to have to go to that pillar position at the edge of the ruck. He sees that Vaha Mahina is barely moving across the pitch. So his read instantly is, if I can get into that space, I'm going to beat Vaha Mahina, because he's not going to close early enough into that pillar post position. So he gives that little trigger call. We don't know exactly what it is, obviously, but he gives the call to Laidlaw, says, I'm coming on that short line, and you see him just going right through in between that pillar and post defender. Now Vaha Mahina does react, he sees him, picks him up late, but it's a blind kind of angle, so he hasn't actually seen him until the very last moment in his peripheral vision, and by the time he reacts, Jones is able to get that fend. The covering sweeper defender isn't able to react, so just shows the kind of quality of his line running. And we saw it in the example earlier on when he scored against England off the 9, and we've seen that from Ireland actually quite a bit. They've used their centres as another kind of tool in the 22, so it's not always just one-off hitting up the forwards. Like, you know, you're expecting CJ Sanders to get on the ball there. Rory Best is going across to kind of resource that, and that's certainly what the Welsh are expecting. You know, heads are in, looking at that ball. Ken Owens is probably the key guy. He doesn't get his head up and scan, and then just out of a blind angle again, there comes Chris Farrell. Now Owens does pick him up here, but it's just too late, and he's able to use his footwork, his power, and get right over the gain line, put Ireland in a really dangerous position close to the try line. It's a simple little tool, but we're seeing it repeatedly from Ireland. Here's another example, and actually at the back you can see Chris Farrell waving like a madman, but in this game Ireland weren't going to go out there. I think Keith Earls, we've seen him so much in this championship just like this on the outside edge, but in this instance he wasn't going to get the ball. It's Bundy Aki, and again you've got that forward carrying pod. That's what Wales are expecting. You can see how tight they are to the ruck here. Again, all their heads are turned in, and then just on a late angle, Bundy Aki comes. And again, they react well, but he's able to just stretch out there and get that score. Really good finish. Here it is again. Murray on the ball at the base of the ruck. Again, that's the pass you're expecting to Jack Conan. And Bonnie's the defender there. He's kind of committed to that narrow channel. And again, that late line from Robbie Henshaw, just coming back against the grain. To finish really powerfully. You see the angle again here. There's Bonnie's head just looking in. So it's a really difficult position, and this defender does actually pick it up a little bit later, but it's really difficult for them to react to someone who's coming back across the grain. And you risk getting absolutely smashed in this as well. Like if they pick you up early, they're going to get a really good strong shoulder on you. But I think it's just been a nice little tweak that Ireland have added to their game plan. Again, there's Jack Conan in a perfect position to carry the ball. He's got support all around him, and that's certainly what the Italians are expecting. But there's the angle again, back against the grain, and this defender is just reacting a little bit too late. And Aki, his power again, he's able to reach out and stretch down, put that down. So it just points to another little tweak that Joe Schmidt's added in that 22 power game, that it's not always those carriers. We've seen a couple of passes out the back door, and this, although it's very simple, just really good lines running from the Irish.
Just go back a little bit, so you just see.
All wrong, Murray. All wrong.
No, it's good. No, go back a little bit more. So in all these examples, so the example we showed earlier about how I'm not sure what game it was, but Ireland there was no threat off 9, yet Ireland were really narrow. If you look at all these examples, you know, you spoke about Chris Farrell out the back screaming for the ball. There's always someone out the back, which means that the third or fourth defender, his eye line is on the guy out the back. Whereas if you don't have that threat, then they can all look in, and they can all smash that hard foot or centre coming on a hard line. But Ireland have basically two options here, and that just creates a disconnect between the third or fourth defender and the fifth, sixth defender who are worried about. So at this moment, they're worried about the ball out the back to Farrell and wide, and then they lose the set Bundy Aki in their eye line. So it's good shape. It looks simple, but it's actually good shape, and it's having that animation up front and out the back, which challenges the defence, which the weak link in the defence is generally between the third and fourth defender.
I think it's just a sign, as you say, it's the shape. It's a sign that Ireland are still developing, and Joe Schmidt gets so angry when people talk about their attack not developing, but these shapes are there now. It's just a case of being really consistent in the decision making. So there are times, like, you know, it's very much on out the back door there. It takes a really strong finish from Bundy Aki, but I think the shapes are consistently there. They've done it out the back door against teams like Italy, probably slightly weaker teams, so the challenge is now to do it consistently against the very best.
Yeah, the risk is if you go out the back door and you get caught behind the gain line, you know, you lose momentum. And I think what the difference between Ireland this year against Wales was we were actually kind of able to bully them a little bit. So if you look at why Wales beat us over the last 4 or 5 years, it was Falatau, it was Lydiate, it was Jake Ball, it was George North, it was Jamie Roberts, it was Jonathan Davies, whereas in that game we had the dominant ball carriers.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating development for Ireland, because we were just talking at the break there, the three guys who've come in, Stockdale, Porter, James Ryan, who've really pushed the team on. They're just exceptional athletes. Like, you know, it's scarcely believable how big an impact James Ryan is making as a 21-year-old as a lock, and Andrew Porter the same as a tight head prop. Positions where you generally have to build up experience and durability, but these guys are incredible athletes. Same with Jacob Stockdale. You know, if he wasn't 6'4", if he wasn't such a big guy, I wonder if they'd put up with those defensive mistakes just for his try scoring ability. But they can see that he's a world-class athlete, as good as anything out there, and they're worth backing. So it's been interesting to see Ireland develop that side of the game, and I think Joe Schmidt has been cognizant of that fact. Maybe in the past Irish teams haven't always been that physical across the board, and then once you add those decision-making things, the shape around that as well, on top of them being athletically brilliant, well, you're heading towards being a very complete team. Excellent.
But before we come back for predictions, we'll take a couple of questions. If we want to get ready there, we do have a couple from Instagram, worryingly. Anthony Flanagan, at Anthony.Flanagan84. Cheers for your question, Anthony. He asks, what position do Ireland need to improve on from what we've seen so far to have a chance of lifting the Webb Ellis? So Anthony is already Grand Slam in the bag, probably next year's Six Nations as well. Yeah, looking ahead to Japan. Yeah, like, is there one particular position? Yeah, I don't think there's a glaring weakness really across the team, and the depth is certainly good. I think it is probably just that collective ability to be able to beat teams in more ways than one. Like, you know, against the All Blacks in Chicago, famously, Ireland were brilliant up front. The maul was really important. Their rucking was key, but also they had that bravery at times to go to the width. You think of that Simon Zebo kick where they went wide off the scrum and pressurised off the kick before Robbie Henshaw kind of scored that clinching try. It's being able to do that consistently against the best teams. Like, the issue is you're not playing those best teams all the time. So that's why November is so important, getting another shot at the All Blacks this year. I don't see a glaring weakness, to be honest, in terms of personnel. I think Joe Schmidt is so clever in the way he develops things, the way he's built that depth. Potentially, you know, back up out half. You know, Joey Carberry's an exceptional talent, but he's not really getting games at 10, is he? If Johnny Sexton goes down injured again, well, there's a big dilemma, you know. Keatley's there, Blandall has been injured, who was in the mix before he was coming into camp. So I think building the depth in that position might be really key, because without Johnny Sexton, it's a very different picture. How are you fixed at 10? Would you take Joey over there for a couple of years?
Yeah, free trial.
Who do we have here? Dan J. Brady, at Dan J. Brady, he says, would losing to Scotland but beating England to take the championship be like kissing your sister, like the Lions draw? And if yes, what would a Grand Slam be like? Well, I'm sorry, that'd be like kissing Dan's sister, I suppose.
It's a Kiwi phrase. They kept talking about that during the
I would say losing to Scotland and beating England to win a Six Nations would be far better than kissing your sister. It's winning a Six Nations. Like, kissing your sister is never good.
Let's get away from that analogy, maybe.
Sorry, Dan, I don't think you'll be getting the tickets, but thank you for your question.
I think, like, before this championship, I thought Ireland were going to win those 4 games and lose in Twickenham. I still haven't really moved away from that. Like, England, like it's hard to imagine England losing 2 games in a championship, especially when they're finishing up in Twickenham. So I think it's going to happen the other way around. I think Ireland are going to possibly win the championship, but actually lose on the final day.
Fair enough. Have we got questions from you guys here? There's one for us in the middle.
How's it going, guys? I have a question about sports administration, so I don't expect to be winning the tickets either.
Somebody's got to win them.
I think it's been a pretty good season overall for Irish rugby, a few ups and downs. The IRFU have been having a bit of a howler of it lately, though. I think it's fair to say they've had a few scandals that have been complete own goals. You think back to how they dealt with the Grobler situation in Munster, how they've reacted to some of the off-field issues in Ulster and the procession of exits from the Ulster backroom team as well. Is it possible that the RFU are a bit too comfortable in terms of their accountability and how they seem to be able to go from scandal to scandal without any particular repercussions? And thinking also on the journalist relationship, which has been quite poor this year as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Scandal, I think, is probably a bit strong. There certainly have been issues. There certainly have been issues that could have been better managed and more proactively. Like the Grobler case, you know, it was a story that picked up. It was clearly going to turn into this massive story, a massive issue that was going to be talked about. Instead of being proactive and getting out, you know, telling Gareth Fitzgerald maybe in Munster, we need you to go out and take one for the team, explain why we did this, and the story will move on a little bit quicker. Instead, it was kind of piecemeal. Even before he made his Pro 14 debut, there was a little statement on a Munster press release kind of bringing it up again. So I definitely think they could be better at managing those things and being a little more, I I don't know, communicative in those instances. I think they are trying that. And I think like the Grobler thing is something they learned from. Philip Brown mentioned like we probably won't sign a player like this again. The Ulster one, like I know the RFU are deeply frustrated with what's going on in Ulster. Like that is more on the Ulster organisation than the RFU. You know, they do have to give them a certain amount of freedom in how they run the organisation, but they're certainly not happy with what's been going on in there, and it will affect the national team if it's not remedied. If Ulster kind of keep going backwards, which it looks like they might do. But yeah, I think the RFU could probably communicate a little bit earlier in some of these issues, but no, like it's a tough position. Everyone's always there to chip away at you, and they certainly don't do everything right. I wouldn't say, but yeah, they're probably trying to learn from the things that have happened this season.
I do think as well they do let the 4 provinces have a certain amount of autonomy, and they only really step in when they need to. So, and I think that's important as well. We want to keep our identity. We want the provinces will always want to have a certain amount of responsibility for their own patch, and probably in this case, the RFU got a lot of flack for incidents that maybe they didn't have complete control over. And you could say, oh well, they do fund everything and they do have final sign off, but I think if you're working for Leinster, Munster, Ulster, Connacht, you don't have to get everything signed off by the RFU as well. So at the end of the day, they take the flak, but I think they will look at maybe the systems and the policies in place, at provincial level that's kind of thrown them under the bus a little bit.
Yeah, and even just being a bit more involved in those decisions. Probably that's going to happen as a result of this. Like Rasmus was one who went out, found Grobler, said, I need a lock. I've lost Donnacha Ryan at a late stage, didn't expect to. I have to have this guy in my squad. Yeah. So they're obviously trying to support Munster in that way. And also with Ulster, they're trying to give them that freedom, but that's absolutely got to be fixed, hasn't it? It's a bit worrying at the moment up there.
Yeah. Really good question, by the way. Anybody else?
We've seen a slight demise in France over the last couple of years. Bernard, I've heard you speak about maybe the over-reliance on talent, and maybe a lack of professionalism on an individual level within the top 14, and it might be leaking through to the national side. I suppose, how far behind do you think they are in terms of their own professional...
I'd say they're a long way behind. I'd say they're 50%, behind in terms of modern sports science, real clear talent ID programs, player development, screening, an understanding and a clear alignment between the national side and the top 14 clubs. I mean, that was officially the reason Guy Noves was sacked, because he hadn't actually spoken to a lot of the top 14 coaches over a 2-year period, which is madness. They're the coaches who are producing players for you, and you need to have a really good handle on your depth chart, who's in form, who's out of form, who's injured, when are they back, etc. And they just haven't had that clarity. And the problem in France is that the top 14 as an organisation, the LNR who run the top 14 are a much stronger body financially than the French Federation, whereas obviously SRU, WRU, IRFU, RFU are massively more powerful. Well, English clubs are powerful, but the RFU have got a serious amount of financial power behind them, and they've managed to do a really good deal with the clubs to keep them on board. And that's the big issue, is politics in France. I mean, they do produce phenomenal players, but if they're not week to week in a club like Clermont or I don't know, Montpellier potentially now with Vern Cotter, etc., where they're getting really good detail and feedback around their performance. They've got a strong game plan that's testing and extending and stretching their skill set. Well, then it's hard to step up at international level. So you'll have a performance like against Ireland where they come out with a lot of passion, and the weather probably contains Ireland a little bit, and they have a huge performance, but you won't get anything consistent. And that's the big issue. So I think they're a long way behind. The under-20s group this year are very good. They're an exceptional group. But the problem is, will they get game time in top 14 where all the coaches are under pressure? There's a hell of a amount of foreign players. And that's the big thing. So there's been good under-20s who've come out before and just disappeared into the black hole of French rugby. So I think they're a long way away. And I think they'll struggle to get back on track or be a real top 5 team until the clubs understand that they have an obligation to produce players for the national team. Everything there is very local. you know, if you want your, if you know, if you're from Tullow, for example, in the south of France, you're obsessed about Tullow winning, and you're actually not really that bothered about France, the national team, and they give out about it on a Monday, but it's forgotten about by Tuesday. Whereas if Clermont lose or Montpellier lose or Bordeaux lose, you know, there's hell to pay until the next game, and they're very local. Whereas, you know, I think we all support a province, but we've a massive passion and interest in our national side. That's not the case in France, and that until that changes as well, you know, the whole ethos and emphasis of the players as well, because they go to French camp knowing that it's not probably the biggest thing in the country that weekend, and that's a very rare. You know, if you play for the All Blacks, Wallabies, Ireland, Wales, you know, it's the biggest event in rugby circles that weekend or maybe of the year. Whereas for them, some of their club games are more important a little bit. Like
that, you mentioned that 20s group. Is that just sheer numbers?
Yeah.
Because like we talk about the RFU, one thing they do well, in fairness, and have done increasingly well, is the development pathways. They're getting onto guys now 15, 16 out of areas that haven't previously played rugby, so they're doing that really well. I sometimes wonder if French rugby really even has like a structure to get to that.
No, they don't, but they rely on the top 14 or Pro D2 clubs. But the reality is that head coach who's coaching at a top 14 level will never benefit from that 16-year-old. Whereas if you have somebody in each club whose job is solely around player development, at some stage he'll get recognition or credit, or he'll survive in his job because he brought through, you know, 216s from his region who play for France in their 20s and hopefully play for the club. Whereas the head coaches are they're so insecure in their job, they're only worried about next weekend, you know, or the weekend after. So whereas in Ireland, you know, you look at how David Nucifora and Joe and the RFU and potentially Joe control the recruitment process. Everything is around, okay, well, where's there a gap in our succession plan? You know, so Ruan Pinar is obviously the easiest example to use. You know, you got John Cooney and Connacht behind or competing with Kieran Marmion. We can move John Cooney or encourage John Cooney to move to Ulster, and now suddenly he's getting game time week in, week out, and he's a real contender to be in the Irish squad. You know, that would never happen in France. There's you know, Guy Noves or Brunel or Laporte cannot ring up a top 14 club and say, listen, there's a Intermac's son, Emile Intermac's son, who's a talented 20-year-old. He's not getting game time at Toulouse at the moment. You know, can he go to Bordeaux for 6 months on a loan deal? That would not happen. And until that happens, they're going to have talent that's just sitting behind, you know, big name players. Because the big clubs, because there's a quota, there's a GIF quota, which basically the money you get from TV rights is based around the percentage of French qualified players you play. They hoover up all the best talent from the small clubs, and then just keep them in their squad to fill the quota. So the best talent isn't actually sometimes allowed to stay where they came through and were produced and get game time until they're good enough to go play in a top team. They actually get taken at 19, 20. The club gets compensated with a check, but then they go and rot in an S-bar. So it's messed up. Yeah, it's going to take a while.
And we still need a 45-metre drop goal to beat them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, because they have incredible ability. They have incredible ability. But if we played France 10 times, I think we'd win. You know, 8 times.
Does make a change from the past. We've got a gentleman down the back and another gentleman up the front here who has had to stand up for a while.
Well, I'm glad I'm not French. It's pretty depressing.
They have a lot more sun than we have and better wine, nice beaches, good food.
It's actually 2 questions in the one, but the second question will be answered with yes or no. I'm just interested in hearing your view on Italy's participation in the Six Nations. Do you think like there should be a change there, with Georgia and Romania being mentioned as, you know, participants? Do you feel like there should be a once-off game? Or I know Romania beat Georgia last year. Yeah,
listen, I think if Zebra and Treviso weren't showing signs of improvement, I'd be really worried. I think it's been pretty hard for Connor to go in there and get 27 or 28 of the 30-man squad who are used to, you know, getting beaten every week and trying to create get a winning mentality and confidence to play a test match. I think what he's done is, you know, he's obviously brought in someone like Steve Aboud. They're looking at their academy structure. The under 20s this year are decent. Zebra and Treviso have improved, and you have to hope that that's going. And there's good coaches, like Connor's brought in good coaches with him. So if I think Italy, even though we haven't seen it, with our own eyes in the Six Nations this year, there's reasons to believe that they will improve. So I'd be a lot slower to say kick them out like maybe I was last year, if Brunel was still there, or Zebra and Treviso weren't showing any sign of progress. And I think that's the big thing for Conor. Conor's had to go in there and actually, it's less about the 30-man squad and getting ready for test games. It's about how can he actually change their whole mentality, which is pretty hard to do in a Latin country. So I think he's on the right track. He's the right man for that job. But also, would it improve Tier 2 countries if they actually had something more than World Cup qualification to aim for? I think it's interesting. That I think Spain are going really well
in Ireland's group, yeah.
In Ireland's group, and so that's they have to have a carrot as well. So while I do think Italy will be better over the next 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't be against a promotion and relegation playoff, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
7 or 8
Georgia have
nations.
probably actually regressed a little bit, probably because they haven't had the quality competition. They haven't been too impressive. I'm not many people watch that Rugby Europe Championship, but I'm an addict, so I do.
If ever there was a map.
they've regressed, and Romania have been overtaken by Spain, so Spain are going to be in Ireland's group, barring an absolute disaster. So there's been a bit of a change there. I think all those countries struggle because of the lack of competition and exposure, really.
Yeah, we've got a gentleman up the front here with a question, and another one here, and another one there. Cheers. You might go with.
Bernard, it's a question for you. I'm very surprised that nobody on the panel has mentioned the line out.
Sorry.
Where do you think we're going with that on Saturday? And also the number 2 position. What do you see for the future when Bestie goes?
I didn't realise the line out was as bad. Do you think the line out was very poor?
No, just
in general.
How you think it would function?
Yeah, I think it would be good, to be honest. I think we got some good personnel there in terms of O'Mahony. If it's Henderson and James Ryan this week, it's obviously a bit of a challenge for James Ryan to call lineouts at international level. He hasn't done it for Leinster, so that's a test. I think Scotland's defensive lineout is very strong, so we definitely could be challenged there. It's interesting. Dan McFarland, who's the Scottish forwards coach, obviously coached Connacht for maybe 7 or 8 years, and he's a real nerd around his line-out D. But I think the Ireland line is functioning well. In terms of Rory, obviously, his best years are behind him. I think Sean Cronin's been exceptional this year for Leinster when he's played, and you got Herring up north. You got I like Scannell. You got Reece Marshall, who's going to qualify for Ireland in Munster. I think we're quite strong in the hooker position. And I think Rory's setting the standard, week in, week out.
Yeah,
and he's been really strong.
Yeah, I think Noel Scannell's probably the one have in the pipeline is the next kind of starting Irish hooker. They've kept him involved, even he's had injury issues this season, but they had him up for a couple of the mini camps just to keep him in the mix as well. And he looks like a very complete player. Yeah, once he can stay free of those injuries, he's a really powerful guy, good darts generally, and a good tackler as well.
Yeah, he's got real size as well, and that's the way the game is going.
Yeah, so they're looking pretty decent in that area as well, but Bessie's still blasting on anyway. Got another question there.
Got another one behind you there, and another one up here as well.
How you doing? I guess I have 2 questions in one. I've noticed the prominence of the under-20s has come up, and the Wolfhounds and the Saxons have kind of gone off the TV. I'm just wondering how that works in terms of, as a Pro 14 coach, how can you release players for under-20s, or are you keeping... I moved to Galway recently and go to a lot of Connacht games, and a lot of the players are now under-18s, under-19s, so it's very tricky. Also, with the under-20s coming in, there's a lot of non-TMO games in Connacht, and I'm just wondering, as a coach, do you coach them differently when there isn't a TMO?
It's interesting actually, because we tried to get a few TMOs at the weekend and we were refused. And speaking to the head of referees today, there was four incidents that the referee made a mistake, and he 2 of them led to tries. So I think the next step for rugby, I think, is a coach's challenge. where you actually have a challenge during a game, kind of like tennis. I'm going to try and get that out there now. But I genuinely think it'll be more interesting. I think I actually get frustrated when I see players consistently asking the referee to go to TMO. But I think what we have the advantage of is in our coach's box of having that live and actually being able to see it and only using that challenge if you feel it's right. So if you challenge something and it proves that you're right, then you keep your challenge. If you challenge something, then the TMO decides. The TMO, this is for games that there is a TMO. The TMO decides that no, the try should stand, or then you lose your challenge. So it's not going to be something that slows the game down even more. In actual fact, it might quicken it up, because if the referee is actually relying on the coach rather than the TMO to look at something 5 or 6 times. So say you have 45 seconds to actually challenge it, or else it's given. You know, I think it might actually quicken the game up, might make it more interesting, put more pressure on us, get our blood pressure up a bit more, get us sacked quicker.
How far can you throw a flag?
No, obviously we have to work. I haven't thought of all the details.
Sorry,
it's just big picture stuff here.
We'll chat afterwards.
Picture stuff. No, but and then for the games that you don't have a TMO, no, we actually don't coach differently. I'm sure some coaches do. Obviously, we coach that, you know, even if you know it's a try, you try and limit the views and know where the cameras are for the games with TMOs. But you know, we don't. And I think it's frustrating if you lose a game because of a decision that potentially could have been reversed from a TMO point of view. But in terms of 20s and stuff, yeah, we have a good relationship with the Welsh Rugby Union. I believe for our youngsters, for them to get a chance to play for Wales, they might never play for Wales, you know, at international level. So to play for Wales at 18, 7s, under 20s level is a huge honour and privilege. So we've released them. We have the right to call up the Welsh management and say we need him for this top 14 game. And you know, once guys have had a cap, this Six Nations, we've had guys back. We brought a couple of them to South Africa because we felt it was a fallow week in the Six Nations under 20s, and they would benefit more from being with us in South Africa than in a training camp. And I think once you're communicating and there's a bit of give and take, and you put the players' best interests at heart, well, I think then you got to sacrifice maybe sometimes your own short-term need to try and help them, you know, have the best career they can.
Just a bit conscious of time here. We'll get this agenda up the front. Just to let you know that the Coaches Challenge will be brought to you by Volkswagen, proud sponsors of this show. There we are.
How's it going? T-shirt cannon, I think, to get the flag onto the field. Just with regards to BBC losing the Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland rights, I'm just wondering what your feeling is to, as you were saying earlier on, the people's game.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it's going to be the people's game if you need, you know, to be paying whatever money for it to actually see it.
Yeah, obviously I think terrestrial access to games is huge. You know, we want our, you know, our public to be able to see those games free to air, to be honest. From a Welsh point of view, from a Welsh regional point of view, you know, we're struggling for income. We're struggling to compete with English Aviva Premiership clubs, top 14 clubs who have, you know, vastly better TV deals. So that's the big carrot for clubs in terms of revenue. It's, you know, it's more important than bums on seats in terms of being able to generate money quickly or having guaranteed money. So I understand why Pro 14 are probably under pressure from the 14 clubs to increase their revenue from TV deals. Obviously, I think it's tough on the people who are losing their jobs in BBC Wales or BBC Ulster or won't have as much work. I think for the fans, it's a difficult one. You know, are we going to be able to convert the non-hardcore rugby fan to pay whatever it'll be, £10 a month or whatever for a subscription? I don't know. Is the other angle that if you can watch it free there, you'll actually, you know, get your family and go down to a game. It's a difficult one. You know, are we going to get more people actually live at the games and then increase our supporter base? Thankfully, I'm only worried about Coaches Challenge and not the actual ins and outs of our budget. But I don't know what's the best. I feel sorry for the fan, armchair fan, or the the person who's not yet a fan. You know, I think we're going to struggle to convert them or interest them in our game by not being free to air, to be honest. But I understand from a financial point of view completely why they made that decision.
There's also an issue about the kind of credibility of the league, where on one hand you need that revenue that still streets behind top 14 Premiership, as you say. On the other hand, you want a league where an Irish fan is actually interested and has the chance to watch the Dragons or the Blues, which is really difficult at times. You know, it's really hard to track those teams. So even with Air Sport coming on, like, they'll probably show predominantly Irish provinces. So do you get to the point where you're just watching the Irish provinces and you don't care about the rest of the league? Are you even that aware of the conference table? So there's a massive balancing act there for the Pro 14, definitely.
Yeah. The away games then as well. So if Leinster say playing in Wales, it's on S4C, it's on BBC Wales now.
Yeah.
Actually, or BBC Ireland.
Yeah, true.
But now it's
true.
Yeah, it's a very controversial decision, and I think the proof will be in the pudding. You know, where are we in a year's time in terms of viewership? You know, if there's not enough people watching it, well, then it's probably long term it's going to hurt us.
I'll miss Jim Neely on BBC Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah,
He loves Ulster. He really loves Ulster.
It's a balls, really. Bernard, we might ask you to pick your winner. So I'll read out the questions for you. There was this gentleman here, and then there was addressing Ireland's weak spot in order for us to win the World Cup.
Yeah.
Kissing your sister, sorry Dan, not a contender. Rugby administration, so that was about the IRFU.
Yeah.
French rugby and where it falls down. There were a good few questions. Italian participation in the Six Nations. The importance of the line out. Pro 14 coaching and the TMO. Do you have a winner there to win tickets to Ireland versus Scotland? Thanks to Volkswagen. Bernard, please.
French rugby.
Yeah. Oh, nice one. That was the gentleman down the back here, wasn't it? Well done. Well done. We'll sort you out there in a minute. Listen, we've kept you for very long, so very briefly, guys, predictions for the weekend in, 30 words or less.
Yeah, I think Ireland will win by 9 to 10 points, which is what the bookies are backing them for. Johnny Sexton.
Sorry, Murray, that's all we've got.
Yeah, Johnny Sexton, Conor Murray controlling it, and I think the pack will be able to just get an edge as well.
Nice.
Yeah, Ireland to win probably by 10 or 12 points, but with a bonus point.
Oh, very nice. We'll be sorted then. Bernard Jackman, thank you very much for joining us. Cheers. Appreciate it. Murray, nice one. And thank you guys as well. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for keeping you so long, but it was good fun. And our thanks as well to Volkswagen, our sponsors. A reminder about the green chair. You know the scale. Go over there and tell your stories. You'll get a free copy of our book even if you sit down there, as far as I'm aware. But the best story will win a prize for the next year's Autumn Internationals, November Internationals. Cheers. Thank you very much. Nice.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.